No, that sounds great. All right. Well, thank you guys for your input and your willingness to join us today. I know we wanted to talk some about FCA history and student rights. It's amazing how often we're involved with an organization and we might not know what all the, how it all came about. So thank you for joining us. And we wanted to start, as always, in a message. And I'm going to move everyone down here. And what we wanted to do is read through Romans 12, 1 and 2. And that's all. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is good, pleasing, and perfect will. And as we went through this message this morning with the staff of FCA, we were blessed by some wisdom with a recent post that God will not whisper over the noise of your life, that when we test and see what God's will is, we are truly transformed. And when we follow and study his word, we can be rest assured that we will do his will and his blood and is following his desire for our lives. So as we go through the history of FCA, if we can keep that in the back of our minds and be blessed through his word. What we wanted to do before, I'm sorry, Saul, did you have something to add to that as well?
No, that was great.
So before we get into the actual history of FCA and we want to see where the history of modern sports is. So we go back to the 1860s and 1920s, and that was the rise of the modern American sports. The first professional team sports was baseball. It's American pastime, and this is also at the same time where football, basketball, and volleyball were invented. Modern Olympics were also created at this time, and college and high school sport leagues formed, and we see where that was then to the rise of travel teams and sports, and what unfortunately has become the god to many of our high school and college students and families. And our goal is to repurpose that and put God back to the center of our lives. So this is about 40 years after that time. Don McClannon was a basketball coach in Oklahoma. And he said, for some time, I've had the idea of forming an organization of athletes and coaches in this hero worshiping nation of ours. If athletes can endure shaving cream, razor blades, and cigarettes, surely they can endorse the Lord too. My idea is to form an organization that would project you as Christian men before the youth and athletes of our nation. And many of our female athletes would note that it just said Christian men. Certainly women's sports came much later in the history of the United States. And when FCA was formed, it was an organization just for men before the women became a strong part of FCA's history later in life. FCA entered the scene in 1954, and that's when Don McClannon met with Branch Rickey. Branch Rickey was an executive and part owner of the Brooklyn Dodgers, and he was also involved with the Pittsburgh Pirates. It's near and dear to my heart. Don traveled all the way from Oklahoma to meet with Branch Rickey for what he thought would be a 5-minute conversation. And that 5-minute conversation turned into 5 hours. Branch Rickey was immediately just very transfixed and interested in the plan that Dawn had come up with. And 2 years after their meeting was the first summer conference and FCA camp in Estes Park, Colorado, and that's just north of Denver, Colorado. And there were 256 campers that attended that first conference. And it's amazing when we see how we started in 1956 and where we are today. Today, FCA is in 107 countries. Just 2 years ago, that number was 64. So we've seen exponential growth worldwide of FCA. And we have 24,452 campers last year, 20,948 huddles, and over 2 million people have been impacted by the Ministry of Fellowship of Christian Athletes worldwide in just 1 year today. So Northeast Indiana, we wanted to give you an idea of where our huddles are. That's our world. We're in 12 different counties in Northeast Indiana. And we are connected. Our international partner is in the Caribbean, and specifically for us, we're in the Cayman Islands. So if you ever have an interest in going on a mission trip, Cayman Islands is the place to go. And Yolanda Whitaker is doing amazing work in the Cayman Islands. And as we move on past our history of FCA, I know one of the things that many of us wonder is what rights do students have in sharing their faith in public schools today? And I want to assure you, you do not have to leave your faith at home. So we will go through some of the challenges that we all have, whether as students, coaches, or teachers. But FCA is here to walk alongside you and to allow you to boldly go and share your faith with others in and out of the public school system. We will specifically talk more about middle school and high school, but certainly everything we talk about today will be applicable at the university level. And we're just so blessed by the support we have of FCA and their legal team and their legal support. And we're here to walk alongside each and every young student, teacher, coach, and administrator in Northeast Indiana and around the country and around the world. So here, students do have the right to share their beliefs, to pray, to evangelize, to read scripture, and to invite others to participate in studying the Lord's word. Now, there are some stipulations, though. It has to be voluntary, student initiated, and not disruptive or coercive. So we do have many rights that students have, but we do have to stay within the confines of our legal system. Some of the other areas that many people have questions about are, I have religious material. What am I allowed to distribute? How can I advertise religious events? And we are permitted to distribute religious material during class if it's relevant to the subject and the assignment. So we do have to be careful that we do not evangelize within a classroom instructional time setting unless it is relevant to what we are studying in that class. However, during non-instructional time, if the school also permits distribution of non-religious material, then they also have to allow us to distribute religious material as well. So that is the key. Whatever is permitted for other clubs for distribution also would have to be permitted. With FCA would have the same rights as any other group would have. And the same goes for advertising religious events. As a student, you may post signs and make announcements. To the same extent, other secular activities may advertise. I know at our local middle school, we have a community bulletin board, and FCA has posted events. We've posted information about the huddle. on that community board, and every school, every student has the right to do that as well. Now, again, there are some limitations. They cannot interfere with school operation. We cannot infringe on the rights of other students. And the schools do have the right to limit time and place and manner of distribution. They just cannot make separate rules for religious organizations than they do for any non-religious group, which is really important to know, that we have the rights of every other group and organization within the school. Many of the other questions that we received in the office are students allowed to pray at school? And the answer is yes, as long as it is student-led and student-initiated. You can pray at school, in your own or in groups, and during non-instructional time. Now, certainly you can't go in the back of the classroom while the teacher's teaching a course and pray during that time. But anytime during non-instructional time, you are permitted to pray, even at graduation. So at graduation, you can pray as long as it is clear that the school has not endorsed the prayer. And we do have 4 different areas where the schools can, if they follow these 4 steps, that they can make it clear to those at graduation that the school is not endorsing. And one of those is to make sure that the school has not previewed the speech. And certainly we have to make sure that we follow all legal guidelines, but it is permitted to pray at graduation. And we're also permitted to pray before and after sporting events. I know at our local middle school, our students have initiated prayer after our soccer games. The students are the ones that approach opponents and meet in the middle of the field to pray. It must be student initiated and student led. Now, 2 things that the prayer cannot be is disruptive or appear that the school has endorsed prayer. So as long as we follow those guidelines, students have every right to pray during school hours. Many of us have heard the term, there's a separation of church and state. But what we have to remember is that the school's obligation is first to educate about the First Amendment, not silence a speaker out of fear that others will misperceive that the school, by allowing the speech, is endorsing the speech. So we have to be careful to understand the separation of church and state is intended that the state does not interfere with our free expression of religion and freedom of speech. And again, by the same token, wearing religious clothing and jewelry, that is treated as speech and is protected by the Equal Access Act and the First Amendment. It's permitted unless it interferes with school operation or infringes on the rights of other students. Now, as we mentioned earlier today, the students have much more rights in freely sharing their faith with others in public schools. Teachers and coaches are somewhat more limited, and the school, and the reason for this is that the school may appear to endorse the views, and that sharing of religious beliefs may appear to have a coercive effect on students. As a coach, I have to be careful about sharing my religion openly during the time that I am coaching or in the school setting, only because I don't want it to appear that I'm giving someone more playing time simply because they share my religious views. And the teachers have the same and similar limitations, because they cannot appear to be giving favoritism or better grade because someone would share their religious views. Which now, that being said, they may briefly share religious views when they're asked. So if a student asks a teacher what their faith is all about or what religion they are, they may briefly share that. They just have to be careful not to take that as an opportunity to evangelize. The teachers may also have Bible studies or pray with other teachers or other school employees, provided that students are not present at that time. Teachers and coaches may also participate in religious-based activities outside of school-sponsored events. So teachers can be Sunday school teachers. They can be involved with other Christian organizations with no fear of repercussion. And what I'd like to finish is by saying that FCA huddles may be organized in one of two ways. Either they can be a school club, or we can be seen as a community group using the school facilities. If FCA is a club, we have the same rights as any other club at school. As soon as there is one other club that is non-curricular or not connected with a school subject, then the door is open for FCA to also be recognized as a school club. Non-school persons may not direct, conduct, control, or regularly attend the FCA if it is a school club. And also school officials, teachers, and coaches may attend to monitor, facilitate, and or supervise, but they may not lead the meetings, which is why many of our FCA groups who are school clubs have a separate leadership meeting for our FCA leaders to prepare for the upcoming FCA school-wide huddles. And then at the huddle, the students would lead the message and the club. Now, FCA can also be seen as a community group or an outside organization using school facilities. Now, if that's the case, FCA would give up the benefits of being a club, which means FCA, the student or the teacher would not be paid normally. We would not be on announcements or be able to have the freedom of advertising the same way other clubs advertise. But we can still, if other outside groups using the school facility are permitted to advertise, then we would be permitted to advertise as well in the same manner that other groups of similar organization would be able to. But the benefit of FCA being a community group is that school officials can lead meetings and participate in religious speech. So that is why many of our groups are community groups using the school facility. So we do have more freedom to share our faith and have teachers and coaches share the word and the message of Jesus Christ in our public schools today. So I wanted to finish with a reminder of Romans 12, 1 and 2. And therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, its good, pleasing, and perfect will. And I wanted to see, we finished